This is the bonus section podcast episode number 95. If you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. Are you the type of person that knows you were meant for something bigger in this lifetime? And that somewhere inside of you, there's just this greater version of yourself trying to break through. But despite all your self-improvement efforts and your self-development, you just can't seem to find the way up there? Well, then, hey, you are definitely in the right place. I'm Danny Griffin, the founder of the bonus section and the host of this podcast, and a person just like you, trying to learn how to live the most fulfilling life possible. Now, to help you take immediate action to move in a better direction, we take all the notes from each episode and we post them at freethinkingtools.com. All right, let's get going. We'll discuss today, if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. I know, a little bit snarky, right? A little bit sarcastic, but it's really true. And I heard that today, and it really shook me and inspired me to talk about this here today. So what I want to say first is, what's interesting about limitations is that we actually probably subconsciously, but consciously set limitations to survive, because they conserve energy. So let's think about this. I don't know why. I'm probably going to have to do some more reading on the animal brain and its juxtaposition or its confrontation with the thriving brain. That's what really makes humans unique. See, if we just had the animal brain, it's pretty obvious when you look at animals. I mean, it's like going to the animal kingdom in Disney and being disappointed because during the day you're riding around and you see all these animals lying down, right? Because they have no need to expend energy to find food at that moment in time. So they're not going to get up and start moving around. And clearly at Disney, they're not going to be doing a lot of hunting. But in the wild, you'll still see them lying down and resting and conserving energy. So that's the animal brain. I don't need to eat right now, so I'm going to conserve. And also, I probably have to run away from animals that are higher up on the food chain. So you see the king of the jungle lying down a lot and relaxing because they're the apex predator, right? They're the one at the top of the food chain. So there's less of a reason to do anything other than hunt and sleep. So it's pretty interesting when you look at that. So here's this mighty beast, limited. Let that sink in. I mean, could you imagine if a lion had to thrive, or it had a human-like brain that consciously it would be saying to itself, oh my gosh, you could have been so much more. You could have led such a bigger pride. You could have done whatever it is as a lion in a thriving sense. But they don't. They just survive. They're conserving energy. So imagine the highest level of a human being, because humans can outsmart a lion any day of the week, right? With being able to be the apex predator above those animals. I mean, certainly without a weapon, it's not going to work, but you get the point, right? Is that we have to see this whole idea of conserving energy as a problem for us, not for them. But it does make sense if we just see our we look at our animal side to do the same. Because if we eat today and we have a place today, we're only going to work as much as it takes to pay for all that stuff, right? Go home, have some shelter, have some food, water, sleep, go and do as much as you have to. This whole concept of the 9 to 5 or the part-time job even. What do we do to just barely survive? So we set these limitations to survive. Here's the problem with that, though. As humans, we experience regret. That's a real key term. I mean, I don't think the lion's sitting around having any regret. Maybe they didn't catch that, that kill there today, but they don't have that real sense of regret that we have. And we have it because of our subconscious desire to thrive. See, that's the problem with this. Now, maybe some of you are more in tune with your thriving desire and you've done more work at the subconscious level to understand, oh, that's that voice, that's that thing. I had mine wake me up in the middle of the night last night. I was driving home from a dinner with my wife and all of a sudden it started to talk to me. Hey, we've got to go do this tomorrow. And that's a Sunday. I'm recording this on a Sunday. So that was a Saturday night when I'm supposed to be at what? Enjoying, conserving, setting limitations, and all of a sudden, subconsciously, there's something going on, and it bubbles up, and it becomes conscious, and I'm sitting here thinking today, oh, you got to get up earlier tomorrow, and I did. I'm in here recording sooner than I am. I have other things that I want to do because I keep getting stuck on my limitations. I've been able to thrive to a certain level, but there are a couple things that I don't know if it's procrastinating. I just can't seem to, the way I'm behaving, make the time. So I change my pattern of behavior because I'm regretful that it hasn't gotten done yet. And that's what I mean. There's that voice. So if you don't hear that inside of you, listen better. It's in all of us. The desire, what makes the human condition versus the animal condition unique is that. It's that voice. I mean, I'm not going to get psychologically or psychoanalytically expressive about this because I have much more studying to do on how it works. But from a commonsensical standpoint, I can just sit here and observe myself and hear this voice loudly and clearly. And by the way, the more that I feed it, the less limited I want to be, the more regretful I feel. So it seems to act as if it's a muscle that if I feed it, it really wants to keep going. And it has a certain energy to it. Sure, maybe it expresses itself and causes anxiety, but I've come to realize that's the good kind of anxiety. That's the thriving anxiety. That, okay, you're anxious because you can smell regrets coming on this one particular thing. So go lean in on that thing. Go work on that thing. Go do that thing. Go make some progress to that thing. Even if you think about it intelligently, make some notes. Do a little homework on your phone. And I was doing that yesterday too. There were things that I wanted to thrive about. And instead of sitting there, and in my context, I'm a real estate agent and broker owner. And instead of sitting there and scrolling up with some, entertaining videos on my phone, I started reading a book. It was kind of hard to read it at first, but then all of a sudden I got used to it and I felt like I was thriving and I wasn't limited. And it was a whole book about pricing your product and how you should push the price and how you should increase your value. And I'm telling you, even after a couple of pages, I felt differently and I felt like I wasn't limited and I wasn't breaking back into that limited jail. And again, I think the idea of an animal is a lot of people end up surviving at different levels. So some people are barely surviving. I mean, they've set the thermostat that they can walk the streets, and it's stunning to me how homeless people, and again, I feel terrible for people that suffer from mental illness that end up homeless and on the street. But there are some people that just check out, and that's the way that they have decided to live consciously. I know that because I've had some experience working with homeless people before, and so have my kids. So it's an interesting thing, right? So you look at all the way at that level to somebody who has maybe achieved in a business sense, but not so much in a familial sense. So you always see human beings that have thrived to a certain level in one area, but there are some other areas that they're regretful about. So get after it, right? Get after it. But here's an interesting point here. The third point here is that you have to fight for one or the other. And I think that's why the quote said, why it struck me, if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them, whatever they are. However you define a limitation, where you're at, that animal brain, you get to fight for that and keep it. But you do have to fight for it because you're going to have to fight for one of these or the other. You're going to have to fight for your limitations, or you're going to have to fight for your goals that you can see would be a bigger version of you. It's going to be a battle for one of them. So, for example, I remember when I wanted to do all this content and give away my best what to do information for free because I authentically wanted to live as a person for others, which I find to be the highest calling I've ever found in life. I think you all probably will need to find that somewhere. I think that's the ultimate human condition, but that's just me, my opinion. So I fought for giving up some other things to thrive in this context. And it's hard. You have to come in here and you have to write and you have to speak and then you have to get the content out. It has to be edited. You have to organize people to syndicate it. And then you might not even be seen by anybody because you're a fly speck in the ocean and you have to trust. But there's just something about all of that process that you're fighting for it. And sometimes, when you get selfish, you wonder, well, why do I do this? And I don't monetize it, or does it even reach anybody? Whatever the case is. But you just have to believe that, no, that's not the point. The point is you're thriving. You're becoming a bigger version of yourself. Even if you leave a footprint that you have no idea that when you're gone, it echoes into this eternity even, or at least into the near future, where there's a legacy that's left behind. We've never lived in a world like this before, where our thoughts and our encouragement to others can be there. Well, man, I'm in. If that's what I can do, I'm in. So I'm going to fight for that. And what's interesting, as I fight for it, I learn more. Because you have to be articulate in your thought. You have to be well studied. So I begin to read books and concepts, and all of a sudden I realize how much I really don't know. And I go back to the basics, and then I teach my kids, hey, what about reading one of these basic books and pick this up? It's interesting. They read it, and on it goes. So we're fighting for expansion. And it's very tough as a coach, because you run up against this. It's not just you fighting for your limitations that you get to keep them. There are other people who will fight for your limitations pretty darn hard, and most of those people are very close to you. It is a very difficult thing to be a coach and a person who thinks like this, not just for himself, but for other people that I care about, that do want to hear from me. Because other people, and mostly in a familial context, you have people say, oh, you're just fine. And I heard something the other day that I agree with. You're not just fine. You're not. Because there's so much potential inside of you that you're aware of, that when somebody says you're just fine, it helps you fight to limit that. Let that sink in for a second. I mean, look, I don't care what you think you see in the mirror. You have incredible potential. We have this crazy history, this genealogy, this potential, and it's mixed with a lot of bad stuff too. And so we're trying to sort all this historical DNA and energy. We're trying to sort it all out in our own lives. It's a big deal, and it's a battle. But you have to understand that when you accept the limitations of who you are, you're not releasing the potential part. And in fact, you might allow for the negative energy that comes from your past to overtake you and devour you whole. We see far too many people pass way too early in life because they fight for their limitations. And when you do that, you're contracting. And when you're contracting, you're not stimulating these positive chemicals. You're not creating this new self-image of what could be. You're actually shrinking down until you're gone in one form or fashion, right? So this is a big deal. You have to fight for one of these things. You can't get away from it, right? You can't. And while you're thriving, you're surviving without really having to think about it. It's fun. I get it. Life ebbs and flows with energy. You get sick or something happens and there's a setback. I'm not talking about being a lunatic and fighting through. I'm saying being reasonable, but you're not going to be able to, in any conscious or harder subconscious state, avoid wanting to thrive. There's just this code inside of you that wants to break free. I say it in the beginning of this podcast. Are you the type of person that wants something greater in life? I say it at the beginning of every bonus section podcast. And that's what I'm speaking to, that voice. You know it's in there. But the other animal says, we're the apex predator. Let's just eat. Let's just go home. Let's just sleep. Turn something on, or just let's scroll and let's just settle down. You're doing fine. Ugh. Now the regret, a little seed of regret grows a little bit more and a little bit more, because that other voice is just, you can't stop the other voice too, no matter what you do. So the bonus section here today is this. There's a clear freedom of choice when it comes to defending and supporting your desire to thrive or survive. And you're going to win at one of them. Really let that sink in. It's a clear freedom of choice. Don't deny that to yourself. We have the incredible opportunity to choose. I know some of your circumstances feel so dire, so burdensome, so exasperating. And I always say this, if you catch me in this podcast and you feel really overwhelmed, seek some professional help, because what seems to be to us so complex and something that we just don't have the capacity to unravel is actually a mirage. And with proper guidance from a professional, you can begin to see what you perceive to be so burdensome is not. But that's how dangerously powerful your mind is at the extreme of accepting these limitations. That if you see the world is so complex that there's no solution to unwind it, then you accept your limitation as a human and you can fall deeply into a depression that might not feel recoverable, but it is. It just is. You can do this. But you have to sometimes go ask for help in that humble moment and say, it seems like I'm at the end of the road here because I've gotten myself so limited in the way that I feel that I can cope and deal with all these complexities. And really smart people out there listening to this, I get you. I get you. Life does seem so complex, exacerbated by all the noise that's out there that makes it feel overwhelming and unachievable to unwind. I get it. I feel your pain. But I'm telling you that I believe, in my opinion, there is a clear freedom of choice. And if you would just decide and you would just choose to thrive against it, and I mean an inch, a micrometer, whatever it is, some very tiny, tiny thing inside you says, well, you know what? I might fight back a wee bit today. I might lean back against this today. I might not go get some professional help yet, but I'm going to go listen to some clinical psychologists online talk about how overwhelmed I feel in trying to thrive and how desperate I feel about that whole thing. Because you can start today. You can start the minute you hear this or somebody else bring up this concept. Right now, you can start thriving and moving in that direction. Because all the regret and the overwhelm, I get it. I get how heavy it is. But you have the choice to think. That's the thing. You can just think differently. I know you're going to get slaughtered by all these limitations and all this overwhelm because you've built that big, hairy, audacious, ugly monster that's weighing on you heavily. But just have the freedom to think positively. And I don't mean patronizingly positively. Think about, what if there's somebody else out there that's gone through what you've gone through that has the key to get out of this jail I've broken into? What if? How about that for some homework or some movement forward to thriving, right? So you do have a clear freedom of choice when it comes to defending or supporting your desire to just barely survive and sink with that ship or thrive, okay? You're going to win at one of them. I want you to win at the thriving one. Let's go back and summarize today. If you fight for your limitations, you're going to get to keep them. So the first point here was, well, why do we set all these limitations? Because your animal brain sets them to survive by conserving energy. So that's what we do. We do enough to survive. The second point here is, the problem with that is we also experience regret about limitations or limiting ourselves because our subconscious has a desire to thrive. The subconscious is programmed to thrive, and that's the human condition. All that wonderful history of potential collides into us, is inside of us, and it's powerful, and it doesn't go away. So if you don't listen to it, you're building upon regret, which has a slippery slope down to depression, overwhelm, and all these ugly things. The third point is, so you have to fight for one or the other. You can fight for your limitations, and that's the point here today. You're going to get them and you get to keep them, or you can fight your way out of there and up to the next level and feel like you're thriving because those are new goals and that starts a new chemical process in the brain. But the bonus section is there's a clear freedom of choice when it comes to defending and supporting your desire to either only survive or survive and thrive. And you're going to win at one of those, survival or thriving. Let me summarize it by saying this. The quote, "If you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them," is a sobering reminder that we're always faced with the battle between our desire to survive or thrive. Well, it makes sense to survive and continue as a species through our children. It's also an incredibly painful realization that we allowed ourselves to be so limited in what we were really capable of becoming. All right, remember, you can take immediate action to get moving towards these better goals and thriving, because we take all the notes from each episode and we post them at freethinkingtools.com, and we give you instant access. Because all I want you to do is think. Do some thinking. If that leads you to reading, even better. If that leads you to writing after you read, even better. And if that leads you to moving towards goals, well, then I've achieved what I'm trying to do with this podcast, which is be a person for others to stimulate you into the best version of yourself possible. Also, don't forget, of course, you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen. We also post our content on YouTube, so don't forget you can subscribe to the bonus section channel, where all of these podcasts in their full form are sitting there as a video as well. We'd also appreciate it if you would join our mission of becoming people for others and share our content with other people just like you, so that they get some help that they need, and this makes them think too. Maybe you do it together. That's even better. But remember this. You have to remember this point. Nobody's coming for you. Nobody's coming to help you. Nobody's coming to put all this in place for you. So go get to work on yourself and a better plan for your goals, and we'll see you in the next episode to help you do just that. Thanks.